I'm a big kid advocate, and in antiques, we need more kids involved in this stuff, so.
For years, American Pickers fans have wondered what really happened between longtime co-stars Robbie Wolfe and Frank Fritz. Whispers of tension, behind-the-scenes drama, and a bitter fallout have swirled ever since Frank's sudden departure from the show. But now, after months of silence, Robbie Wolfe has finally spoken out, and what he has to say isn't good. Was their friendship beyond repair? What really happened in his later years? Join us as we unravel Robbie Wolfe's surprising revelation on Frank Fritz. Frank Fritz's journey. After Frank passed away, everyone was waiting to hear from his longtime friend and former co-star. Even though they had their differences over the years, Robbie Wolfe finally broke his silence about Frank Fritz. And what he had to say wasn't good. But before we talk about the end of Frank's journey, we have to look back at what he brought to the world. Frank Fritz's life wasn't just about collecting antiques. It was about seeing history where others saw junk. From a young age, he had a special talent for recognizing the value in things most people ignored. This ability would eventually make him a household name. But before he ever appeared on television, before the fame and the fan base, he was just a kid with an unusual passion for collecting. Born on October 11, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa, a town with deep American roots, Frank was different from most kids his age. While others spent their time playing sports or video games, Frank was on the hunt for hidden treasures. His fascination with objects started early: coins, stamps, beer cans, old razor blades. If it had a story, he wanted to know it. Imagine a young Frank stepping into an antique shop for the first time. The air is thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. The rhythmic ticking of grandfather clocks fills the room. Most kids would be bored, but not Frank. To him, every item was a mystery waiting to be solved. As he grew older, his passion only deepened. His small collectibles turned into bigger finds: motorcycles, dirt bikes, and rare memorabilia. Weekends were spent at flea markets, garage sales, and estate auctions, always searching for the next great discovery. Many might have thought he was just a kid with an odd hobby, but to Frank, it was much more than that. It was an adventure. But here's where his story takes a surprising turn. You'd think that with his love for antiques, he would have jumped straight into the business. Instead, after high school, Frank took a completely different path, one that had nothing to do with collecting. For nearly 25 years, he worked as a fire inspector in Iowa. It was a stable job with a steady paycheck, but deep down, he never stopped being a collector. At first glance, being a fire inspector had little to do with antiques, but in a way, it was the perfect job for someone like Frank. His work took him into old buildings, firehouses, and warehouses, places often filled with forgotten treasures. Soon he started collecting firehouse memorabilia: helmets, extinguishers, antique fire alarms, items that told the story of the brave firefighters who once used them. Little by little, Frank realized his passion wasn't just a hobby. The items he found weren't just sentimental, they had real financial value. Leaving behind a steady career isn't easy, but Frank took the risk. He opened his own antique shop, Frank's Finds, specializing in firemen's equipment and other rare collectibles. It was a small step, but a crucial one. He was no longer just a collector. He was a businessman, turning his lifelong passion into a career. What if he could turn his love for history into something bigger? What if he could do this full-time? Let's explore further. Frank and Robbie's path to fame. Frank Fritz will always be remembered for American Pickers. The show didn't just make him famous, it turned him into a well-known face among fans of antiques and treasure hunting all across the country. But Frank's journey wasn't just about collecting rusty motorcycles or vintage signs. It was a story of friendship, passion, and ultimately, a heartbreaking falling out. At the core of American Pickers was the dynamic duo of Frank Fritz and Robbie Wolfe, two men who spent over a decade traveling the backroads of America, searching for hidden gems in barns, garages, and junkyards. But long before the cameras started rolling, Before fame and fortune, they were just two kids from Iowa who had a deep love for collecting. Their journey together was full of excitement, success, and sadly, betrayal. Frank Fritz was born on October 11, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa, while Robbie Wolfe came into the world a little over a year later in Joliet, Illinois, though they both grew up in the same town, Bettendorf, Iowa. They weren't childhood best friends. Their paths ran parallel, but they didn't truly become close until their shared passion for antiques brought them together later in life. Robbie was always the dreamer, the guy with big ideas. He didn't just want to collect antiques, he wanted to turn picking into something much bigger. He had a vision. What if people could watch pickers like them in action? Frank, on the other hand, was more laid back. He loved the thrill of the hunt and was happy running his small antique shop, Frank's Finds. He wasn't chasing fame or fortune. He simply enjoyed discovering lost treasures, chatting with fellow collectors, and making a living doing what he loved. When Robbie first pitched the idea of a reality show, Frank wasn't immediately on board. He was skeptical, unsure if people would actually want to watch them dig through old barns and garages. But Robbie was determined. He spent years filming his own picking adventures, crafting a pitch and knocking on the doors of various TV networks. After countless rejections, the History Channel finally saw the potential, and in 2010, American Pickers was born. Almost overnight, Frank and Robbie became reality TV stars. The show's formula was simple yet addictive. Two best friends traveling across America, searching for forgotten treasures. But what truly made the show special wasn't just the antiques. It was the people they met and the stories behind the objects. Robbie was the smooth talker, the businessman, and the deal maker. He had the energy, the vision, and the drive to turn every opportunity into something bigger. Frank, on the other hand, was the heart of the show. He had a natural way of making people feel comfortable, cracking jokes, bonding with collectors, and turning even awkward moments into something fun. Fans loved him because he was genuine. He wasn't just playing a role for the cameras. He truly loved picking. For over a decade, the two traveled the country, hunting for what they called rusty gold. Their chemistry was undeniable. Watching them was like watching two brothers joke, argue, and work together. And while Robbie often took the lead in negotiations, Frank had his own specialty: motorcycles. If there was an old bike buried under years of dust, Frank was the one who lit up with excitement. But despite their success, cracks started forming in their friendship. What began as a shared passion slowly turned into tension, misunderstandings, and eventually a public rift that left fans heartbroken. So what really happened between Frank and Robbie? And how did their once unbreakable bond fall apart? Let's find out. Frank's departure. On screen, everything seemed perfect. Two friends traveling the country, uncovering hidden treasures, and sharing laughs along the way. But behind the scenes, cracks were starting to show. By 2020, fans began noticing something odd. Frank was missing from episodes. At first, the reason behind his absence was unclear, with only vague explanations given. Then, the truth came out. Frank had stepped away due to serious health problems. He had undergone a major back surgery that left him with 185 stitches and 2 metal rods in his spine. But that wasn't all. He was also struggling with personal battles, including addiction. At first, viewers assumed he would eventually return. But as the months passed and Frank remained absent, the silence from both Robbie and the American Pickers team became impossible to ignore. Then, in 2021, the news finally broke. Frank was officially out. Robbie released a statement saying he would miss Frank and wished him well. On the surface, it seemed like a simple professional farewell, but Frank had a different story to tell. In interviews, he didn't hold back. He felt abandoned and betrayed. According to him, after working together for over a decade, traveling thousands of miles, building a successful show, and sharing countless experiences, Robbie never once reached out to check on him during his recovery. Not a call, not a text, nothing. Frank made it clear that he believed Robbie had wanted him out of the show for a long time. He even claimed that their friendship was mostly for the cameras, and that behind the scenes, they were never as close as fans thought. For viewers who had followed the duo for years, it was a shocking and painful revelation. The fallout was intense. Social media exploded, with fans taking sides. Some blamed Frank's personal struggles, arguing that his health and addiction issues made it difficult for him to return. Others accused Robbie of turning his back on his longtime partner, saying that after everything they had built together, he should have at least shown some support. Frank wasn't just a co-host, he was the heart of the show for many fans. His humor, excitement, and ability to turn an ordinary pick into an adventure made American pickers special. Even after he was gone, viewers kept asking for his return, hoping for a reunion that never came. Frank's departure marked the end of an era. The show went on, but it was never quite the same. That special dynamic, the chemistry that made it feel like more than just a show about antiques, was gone. For many fans, American Pickers just didn't feel the same without Frank. But did he go through tough times? Let's find out. Frank's struggles with life. Frank Fritz may have been missing from American Pickers, but he was never forgotten by his fans. For years, they had watched him travel across the country, cracking jokes and getting excited over rusty treasures. But behind the charm and laughter, Frank was quietly fighting battles that few ever saw. Life off-screen wasn't as easy as it seemed. One struggle after another piled onto his shoulders until the weight became unbearable. His health, his personal life, and the mistakes of his past all collided, creating a storm that nearly took everything from him. As the saying goes, a true friend is there when you need them the most. And in Frank's darkest moments, an old friend re-entered his life, Robbie Wolfe. For years, fans noticed changes in Frank. His weight dropped dramatically, and while some thought it was just aging, others worried something was wrong. Eventually, Frank revealed the truth. He had Crohn's disease, a relentless illness with no cure. One day you might feel fine, and the next, you can barely eat. Frank had been battling it for years, often hiding his pain behind his usual charm. He lost 65 pounds in an attempt to manage it, but no amount of weight loss could make the disease disappear. Imagine living every day, never knowing when a painful flare-up might strike, constantly exhausted, unable to enjoy the food you love. That was Frank's reality. But despite it all, he refused to let Crohn's define him. Yet Crohn's was only one of the battles he faced. Fame, which seemed glamorous from the outside, came with its own burdens. When American Pickers became a massive hit, Frank went from being a small-town antique dealer to a TV celebrity. Strangers recognized him everywhere, expecting him to always be the same fun-loving guy they saw on television. But behind closed doors, the pressure was mounting. He struggled with anxiety and, like many in his position, turned to medication. Xanax helped ease his mind, but when mixed with alcohol, it became a dangerous combination. Then came the mistake that changed everything. In 2017, Frank was pulled over for driving the wrong way on an Iowa interstate. He had been drinking and had taken Xanax. The arrest made headlines, shocking fans who had only known him as the lovable picker from TV. But for Frank, this wasn't just a news story, it was a wake-up call. He admitted that alcohol had become more than just an occasional indulgence. It had turned into an escape. His mother had battled alcoholism, so had his grandfather. Both had lost their lives to it. Frank saw the same fate waiting for him if he didn't change course, so he made a decision that would define the next chapter of his life. He checked himself into a rehab center in Iowa, not for a quick fix, but for 77 days. He took his recovery seriously, determined to break the cycle that had haunted his family for generations. And when he walked out, he was a different man. He said he no longer even liked drinking. He wanted to live, to be healthy, and to get back to doing what he loved. But life wasn't finished testing him. In July 2022, tragedy struck again. Frank was found unresponsive in his home. He had suffered a massive stroke. He was rushed to the hospital, and for weeks, no one knew if he would survive. The man who had once crisscrossed the country searching for hidden treasures was now fighting just to stay alive. A stroke is more than just a medical emergency. It can take away everything. your ability to walk, to talk, even to think clearly. For Frank, who had already endured so much, this was yet another mountain to climb. He was transferred to a rehabilitation center where doctors worked to help him regain his independence. But the damage was severe. He could no longer care for himself. A court had to appoint a guardian to oversee his daily life, while a bank controlled his finances. The man who had once lived freely on the open road was now dependent on others for even the smallest tasks. And then came the crushing financial burden. His medical care cost nearly $30,000 a month. It was a staggering number, a reminder of just how much his condition had taken from him. Fans could only watch and hope that somehow he would find his way back. But through all of this, something unexpected happened. His friendship with Robbie changed. Despite their past disagreements, Robbie reached out. He visited Frank in the hospital, checked in on him, and made sure he was being taken care of. It wasn't about business anymore. There were no TV cameras, no contracts, just two old friends finding their way back to each other. Robbie later revealed that they had spoken many times before Frank's passing. The anger and grudges had melted away, replaced by understanding. In the end, there was no more resentment, just the bond of a friendship that had endured through the highs and the heartbreaks of life. A tragic love story. Frank Fritz's life was filled with adventure, love, and heartache. While he found support from an old friend in his final days, one person was noticeably missing: Diane Bankson. Their love story had all the makings of a fairy tale, but ended in heartbreak instead. Frank and Diane's relationship was anything but simple. They first met when Frank was just 25 years old, and over the years, their love flickered on and off. But in 2017, Frank was ready to make it permanent. He proposed, promising Diane a future together. He bought them a beautiful home in Iowa, presented her with an expensive engagement ring, and dreamed of growing old by her side. But fairy tales don't always have happy endings. Just a year later, in 2018, everything fell apart. Diane claimed she caught Frank in bed with another woman inside their farmhouse, a betrayal she could never forgive. Devastated, she ended the engagement, and their love story turned into a bitter, public feud. Frank, however, had a different version of events. He insisted that Diane had been the unfaithful one, secretly seeing another man for over 2 years. The accusations flew back and forth, and their once loving relationship dissolved into blame and heartbreak. The pain left a lasting mark on Frank, both emotionally and physically. As a reminder of the betrayal he felt, he got a tattoo that read, "Once a cheater, always a cheater." It was clear there would be no reconciliation. If things weren't already messy, they took an even darker turn in 2020. Diane filed a lawsuit against Frank, accusing him of negligence. She claimed he had been reckless while handling fireworks, leading to an accident that left her with severe burns on her hands and arms. According to her, Frank had improperly disposed of a firework in an ashtray, causing an explosion. The burns were so bad she lost her eyelashes and eyebrows. But what hurt her the most was Frank's alleged reaction. She claimed he refused to take her to the hospital and instead told her to toughen up. The lawsuit made headlines, but just a few months later, Diane dismissed the case. However, by then, the damage was done. Their love story, which had lasted for decades, had crumbled into bitterness, accusations, and legal battles. After their split, Frank sold their Iowa mansion in 2021 and tried to move on. Diane did the same. By 2022, she had found love again, this time with someone new. As far as anyone knows, Frank and Diane never spoke again. What had once been a story filled with love and hope had turned into nothing more than a painful memory. Frank's final days. As the years passed, Frank's health declined. His body, already weakened by illness and heartbreak, couldn't keep up the fight forever. By September 2024, doctors knew there was nothing more they could do. The end was near. When the call came that Frank didn't have much time left, his old friend and American Pickers co-star Robbie Wolfe didn't hesitate. The past no longer mattered, the fights, the years of silence. The things left unsaid, they all faded away. What mattered now was being there. Frank wasn't alone in his final moments. His mother was by his side. A close family friend sat nearby, and Robbie, his longtime picking partner, held his hand. The room was quiet, no cameras, no bright lights, no scripts. Just the people who truly cared about him, waiting with him as he took his final breaths. As Frank's breathing slowed, Robbie leaned in and whispered to him. He told him he loved him. He told him he forgave him. He told him everything was okay. Frank didn't leave this world as a reality TV star or a celebrity. He left as a man who had loved, lost, and been surrounded by those who still cared. His official cause of death was listed as complications from the massive stroke he had suffered in 2022. His body had been fighting for 2 years, but the damage was too severe. On top of that, he also battled aortic stenosis, a condition that restricted blood flow from his heart. Walking, breathing, even standing had become exhausting. Day by day, his body had been giving up piece by piece. When news of his passing spread, fans mourned. Frank had been more than just a guy on television. He was real, relatable. He was the friend you'd want on a road trip, the guy who could make you laugh even in the middle of a junkyard. He spent his life searching for lost treasures, but in the end, the most valuable treasures weren't the antiques he found. They were the friendships he made and the memories he left behind. Robbie Wolfe, having been by Frank's side in his final days, finally spoke out about his late friend. In a rare and emotional interview, he shared a truth that few had heard before. Frank was a good man, Robbie admitted, but he made one crucial mistake, and that mistake cost him everything. Frank's biggest mistake, according to Robbie, wasn't about his health or his career. It was about love. He lost her, Robbie said. The moment he sold that house, he lost her. Robbie wasn't talking about Diane in a literal sense. He meant that when Frank let go of the home he had built with his former fiancée, he also let go of his chance at happiness. Instead of fighting for their relationship, instead of having an honest conversation, Frank walked away. And in doing so, he lost more than just a house. He lost the one person who might have been there when everything started to fall apart. According to Robbie, Diane had wanted to try again. She had hoped for a second chance, but that chance never came. And maybe, just maybe, if she had been there, Frank wouldn't have faced his battles alone. Maybe he would still be alive today. That was Frank's real mistake, not taking a second chance on love when he had the chance. What do you think of Robbie Wolfe's shocking revelation on Frank Fritz? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.